She had always believed in kindness and honesty. Ever since she was a little girl, she grew up thinking that helping others and being true to herself were the most important things in life. When she met him, she thought she had found the perfect partner. He was gentle, understanding, and seemed to care deeply for her. Their connection felt natural, and soon they decided to get married. It was a small ceremony, intimate, filled with laughter and tears of joy. Friends and distant relatives had come, congratulating them, and everyone could see the happiness in her eyes. After the wedding, she moved into his house. It was a beautiful home, filled with warmth, but she soon noticed the subtle ways in which his family controlled the environment. At first, she brushed it off, thinking that every family had its ways and traditions. They smiled when she entered the room and asked polite questions, but there was a strange sharpness in their tone, a sense of judgment that lingered under the surface. She tried to overlook it, focusing on the life she was building with her husband. She spent her days learning the routines of the household. She cooked meals with care, cleaned and organized, and tried to make the home a place where everyone felt comfortable. She noticed how her husband seemed happier when she was around, and that gave her hope. Evenings were quiet but comforting. Sometimes they would sit together in the living room sipping tea, talking about their dreams and plans. It was in these small moments that she felt she had found her safe space in the world. However, there were subtle signs that not everything was as it seemed. The in-laws often commented on what she was doing, sometimes in ways that seemed helpful but carried a hidden criticism. When she prepared meals, they would suggest minor changes as if nothing she did was quite right. When she tried to discuss her thoughts or ideas, they would nod politely but quickly divert the conversation. At first, she convinced herself that this was normal, that every family had its quirks. She reminded herself that she was new to the family and perhaps needed to be patient. Her husband, noticing the tension, tried to reassure her. He would say, "They just have their ways. It will get better with time." She wanted to believe him. She loved him dearly, and the thought of conflict with his family was unsettling. Still, there were nights when she lay awake, thinking about the small remarks, the cold smiles and the subtle dismissals. She wondered if she was imagining things, if maybe her sensitivity was making her overthink, but deep down she felt a growing unease. Life continued in this pattern for months. She worked hard to maintain harmony, taking care not to upset anyone. Yet she began to notice patterns that troubled her. Certain valuable items would go missing, and when she asked, the questions were brushed aside or deflected. Bills would appear to be paid differently than she remembered, and she would find small discrepancies in household accounts. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach every time she noticed something off, but she didn't know how to address it. She feared confrontation, and she didn't want to believe that the family she married into could act in ways that seemed selfish or dishonest. Despite these challenges, she continued to focus on the positive. She reminded herself of the reason she had fallen in love with her husband. She tried to strengthen their bond, finding moments of joy in small activities. They would take short walks together, sometimes laughing over shared memories or dreams for the future. She hoped that if she maintained kindness and patience, the family would eventually warm up to her, and things would fall into a smoother rhythm. There were also moments that gave her hope. Once, while preparing a family dinner, she noticed her mother-in-law lingering in the kitchen, observing her quietly. She smiled and tried to engage her in conversation. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might connect. Her father-in-law, who usually spoke little, gave her a nod of approval when she presented a dish he liked. She clung to these small signs, feeling that perhaps patience and effort would be rewarded. Yet as days passed, she realized that her efforts were not always appreciated. Her in-laws began asking more intrusive questions about finances, subtly implying that she and her husband should spend less or adjust their lifestyle. There were moments when she felt the weight of judgment in every word they spoke. She tried to maintain composure, hiding her frustration, but inside, she was beginning to feel trapped in a world where her hard work and dedication were taken for granted. Her husband, too, seemed caught between his family and her. He loved her, but he often appeared anxious when discussing money or family matters. Sometimes she saw a shadow of worry cross his face when his parents spoke sharply or made veiled criticisms. He would comfort her, saying, "We'll figure this out together." But the uncertainty in his eyes mirrored the tension she felt in her own heart. One evening, after a long day of cooking and managing household responsibilities, she sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. the soft ticking of the clock echoing in the silence. She thought about her journey so far, the joy of marriage, the effort she had put into creating a happy home, and the subtle challenges she had faced with her in-laws. She felt a mix of emotions, love for her husband, frustration with the family, and a lingering worry about the future. She wondered if this was the kind of life she had imagined, or if she was slowly losing herself in the process. Despite the growing tension, she did not give up. She found comfort in her small routines, tending to the garden, reading late at night, and writing in her journal. These moments gave her strength, allowing her to reflect and gather her thoughts. She began to notice that her resilience was growing. She realized that she was learning to navigate the complexities of family life, balancing kindness with self-respect. Her observations became sharper. She started noting patterns in the household, how certain items went missing, how the in-laws interacted with her husband, and how they subtly tried to control decisions. She knew she had to be careful, but she also understood that awareness was her first step toward protecting herself and the life she was building with her husband. One afternoon, she overheard a conversation between her husband and his father. Her heart sank as she realized that the in-laws were discussing finances in ways that excluded her input. The realization hit her hard. The challenges she faced were not just small misunderstandings, but part of a larger pattern. Her trust had been taken for granted, and the life she had envisioned was slowly slipping from her hands. She felt a pang of fear and sadness, unsure of how to address the situation without causing conflict. Yet even in the face of this growing tension, she held on to hope. She remembered the reasons she had chosen this path: love, commitment, and the belief that kindness could bridge gaps. She resolved to continue doing her best, knowing that her integrity and patience were qualities that could never be taken away. She wanted to face the challenges with grace, even if the path ahead was uncertain. The days blended into weeks, and she continued to navigate the delicate balance of family life. She found moments of joy in small victories: a shared laugh with her husband, a compliment from a family member, or a quiet moment of peace in the garden. These moments reminded her why she had embarked on this journey and gave her the strength to endure the hardships. At the same time, the subtle tension in the household remained. She could feel it in the way her in-laws spoke, in the way they glanced at her belongings, and in the hushed conversations she occasionally overheard. She knew that her journey was only beginning, and that she needed to prepare herself for the challenges ahead. Despite the uncertainty, she found solace in her love for her husband and her belief in her own resilience. She realized that while she could not control the actions of others, she could control her response. She could choose to remain kind, patient, and strong, and in doing so, she could preserve her own sense of dignity and hope. As the first months of her married life unfolded, she learned valuable lessons about trust, patience, and the complexities of human behavior. She discovered that love alone was not always enough to protect against betrayal or selfishness, but it could provide the foundation for strength and resilience. She understood that her journey was not just about managing a household, but about discovering her own inner courage and determination. By the end of this chapter of her life, she felt a mix of emotions: love, hope, sadness, and growing determination. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. With each passing day, she learned more about herself, about the people around her, and about the delicate balance between kindness and self-preservation. She was beginning to understand that life was not always fair, but with courage and patience, she could navigate even the most difficult circumstances, and so, she continued to move forward, holding on to hope, nurturing her love for her husband, and quietly preparing herself for the challenges that awaited. She did not yet know the full extent of the trials she would face, but she was learning that resilience, patience, and inner strength were the true keys to surviving and thriving, even in the most complicated of families. Months had passed since she had moved into her husband's home, and the quiet unease she had felt before was growing into something heavier. She started noticing more than just the small criticisms or subtle dismissals. Things that once seemed insignificant were now unmistakable signs that her in-laws were taking advantage of her trust. Valuables went missing. Bills seemed out of place, and she began discovering that money and property were being quietly shifted without her knowledge. Every day she found herself walking a delicate line between confrontation and self-protection. Her husband tried to stay calm, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He loved her, but the pressure from his family weighed on him, and he often remained silent in situations where he should have supported her. She felt a pang of sadness mixed with anger. The man she married seemed trapped, and so was she. Yet despite her frustration, she did not want to create a bigger conflict. She wanted solutions, not fights, and she hoped that with patience and intelligence she could navigate the situation. It began with small incidents. A set of jewelry she had brought from her parents' home was gone. When she asked about it, the answers were vague, and she was told she must have misplaced it. Later, she found subtle clues that pointed to the in-laws' involvement. It was a shock, a betrayal that cut deep. She had given them her trust, treated them with respect, and yet they had exploited her kindness. Her stomach would twist every time she remembered that she had been blind to their intentions. Then came the financial discrepancies. Bills were paid differently than she remembered. Savings accounts had strange withdrawals, and items of value from the household seemed to disappear without explanation. She began keeping a careful record, noting every expense, every missing item. Her eyes were opening to the reality that she had been too trusting, too focused on maintaining peace, while those around her quietly took advantage. Her heart ached with the realization that she had been naive. She tried to confront her husband gently, hoping for understanding and support. "Have you noticed these things?" she asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, avoided eye contact, and admitted that he had noticed but didn't know how to stop it. "I don't want to upset my parents," he said. "They are just like that." "I'm sorry." Her disappointment was sharp, almost physical. She had hoped for a partner who would stand with her, but instead, she found herself standing alone against a tide of betrayal. The feeling of isolation grew. She loved her husband dearly, but she could no longer rely on him to shield her from harm. She had to find a way to protect herself, to reclaim control over her own life. She spent nights awake, thinking through strategies, considering her options. Should she involve authorities, confront the family directly, or quietly reclaim what was hers? Each choice carried risks, and she felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her. The in-laws, unaware of her growing awareness, continued their subtle manipulations. They would make comments about spending habits, implying that she and her husband were reckless, even as they quietly moved property and money into their own control. It was as if every effort she made to create a peaceful home was being undermined. She realized that patience alone would not protect her, and that strength, intelligence, and careful action would be necessary. There were moments when despair seemed overwhelming. She felt her efforts had gone unnoticed. Her trust had been betrayed, and her dreams of a happy, secure life were slipping away. Tears came quietly in the night when no one could see, a mixture of grief, frustration, and loneliness. Yet even in these moments, she refused to give up. She reminded herself of her own resilience, the lessons she had learned about navigating difficult situations, and the hope that truth and courage would guide her through. Her husband, torn between love and family loyalty, began to change subtly. He would often avoid discussing financial matters or household concerns, leaving her to manage the tension alone. She began to see that their partnership, while filled with love, had cracks that could not be ignored. She needed to find her own voice, to assert herself without alienating the people around her, and to do so required careful observation and planning. She also began to notice the reactions of other relatives and neighbors. Some seemed aware of the in-laws' manipulations but chose to stay silent. Their polite smiles and casual advice felt hollow, reinforcing her sense of isolation. Yet these observations strengthened her resolve. She knew she had to rely on her own instincts and intelligence, rather than expecting protection or understanding from others. Her journey was her own, and the responsibility for navigating it rested squarely on her shoulders. The turning point came when she discovered that a significant sum of money, meant for her and her husband's savings, had been transferred without their consent. The realization was a blow, but it also sparked a new determination within her. She understood now that the in-laws' actions were deliberate, systematic, and harmful. She could no longer ignore the pattern, and she resolved to take steps to reclaim control. It was not just about money. It was about her dignity, her security, and the life she had worked so hard to build. Her strategy was careful and measured. She began documenting every incident, creating a record of missing items, suspicious financial activity, and patterns of manipulation. She kept her emotions in check during interactions with the in-laws, knowing that any outburst could be used against her. Her patience, once a source of vulnerability, became a tool. She approached the situation like a puzzle, observing, noting, and planning, all while maintaining the appearance of calm and cooperation. During this time, she also focused on her personal growth. She found solace in reading, writing, and moments of reflection. These activities strengthened her mind and spirit, allowing her to approach the situation with clarity and determination. She realized that her inner strength was growing, fueled by adversity. The betrayal she had experienced, painful as it was, became a catalyst for her transformation, turning fear into focus and frustration into resolve. One evening, while reviewing her notes and records, she realized that she had enough information to confront the in-laws in a careful, logical way. She knew that confrontation alone could escalate conflict, so she planned her approach meticulously. Her goal was not vengeance, but reclaiming what was rightfully hers and protecting her life and her future. The thought of standing up for herself brought a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. She was nervous, yes, but she also felt a surge of pride in her own courage. Despite the mounting tension, there were brief moments of hope and joy. She and her husband shared quiet dinners, took short walks, and found solace in each other's company. These moments reminded her of why she had embarked on this journey, and they strengthened her determination to navigate the challenges ahead. She understood that love, while not always protective, was a source of resilience and motivation. The in-laws, unaware of her growing awareness and careful documentation, continued their schemes. Each attempt they made to control or manipulate her strengthened her resolve. She realized that their actions were a reflection of their own fears and limitations, not of her worth or abilities. This understanding brought her a sense of calm. She would not be consumed by anger or despair. Instead, she would act with intelligence, patience, and quiet strength. As days turned into weeks, she began taking small, strategic steps. She monitored finances closely, secured important documents, and quietly reclaimed control over certain aspects of the household. Every small victory gave her confidence and a sense of agency. She began to understand that the power to protect her life and future lay within her, not in the actions or approval of others. Her determination grew stronger with each challenge she overcame. Yet even as she gained control over practical matters, the emotional toll remained. She felt sadness and disappointment at the betrayal of trust, and occasional waves of loneliness reminded her of the isolation she had endured. She allowed herself these moments of vulnerability, knowing that acknowledging them was part of her strength. She did not ignore her feelings but faced them with courage, understanding that they were a natural response to the hardships she had endured. In the quiet moments of reflection, she also considered her husband's position. She understood his fear and hesitation, his struggle between love for her and loyalty to his family. While she sometimes felt frustrated by his passivity, she also recognized his humanity and the complexity of his situation. Her empathy for him, even amidst betrayal, became another source of strength, guiding her actions with wisdom and compassion. By the end of this chapter in her life, she had transformed in subtle but profound ways. She was no longer the naive, trusting woman who had walked into the household months ago. She had learned to observe, analyze, and act with careful intention. She had discovered reserves of courage, patience, and intelligence that she had not known existed. She was ready to face the next phase of her journey, equipped with the tools, knowledge, and inner strength necessary to confront challenges and reclaim her life. Despite the difficulties she had faced, she held on to hope. She believed that justice, truth, and courage would guide her forward. She understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced betrayal, isolation, and manipulation, and she had emerged stronger and wiser. She knew that the coming days would test her further, but she felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited, confident in her own resilience and determination. The days following her discoveries were some of the hardest she had ever experienced. Each morning brought a quiet tension, a sense that the house she lived in was no longer entirely hers. She tried to move carefully, observing every word and gesture of her in-laws, learning how to anticipate their actions. She realized that every family had conflicts, but this was different. There was a calculated, almost hidden strategy behind their actions, and she had to be equally careful in how she responded. Her husband continued to be a source of both comfort and worry. He loved her deeply, but he was torn. He would sometimes speak up in her defense, only to be quickly silenced by a disapproving glance or a subtle word from his parents. She watched him struggle silently and felt a mix of compassion and frustration. She wished he could see the truth more clearly, but she also understood that fear and family loyalty could be strong chains. She realized that, for now, she had to rely mostly on herself. She started documenting everything in meticulous detail. Each missing item, each strange withdrawal, each suspicious interaction was noted. It became a way to maintain clarity in the chaos and to feel a sense of control. At first it was exhausting, but gradually it became a source of empowerment. She could see patterns forming, and she began to understand how the in-laws operated. Knowledge, she realized, would be her greatest ally. During this period, she also faced moments of deep despair. She felt the sting of betrayal, not just from her in-laws but from her husband's hesitancy. Nights were often long, filled with quiet tears and whispered fears. She questioned herself. Had she misjudged the family? Had she been too trusting? Had she overlooked signs that now seemed obvious? But after each wave of doubt, she found her strength again. She reminded herself of her own values and the reasons she had fought to maintain her integrity. She was not powerless, and she would not let bitterness consume her. As she navigated the complex web of family dynamics, she also began seeking subtle allies. A distant relative or a neighbor's quiet advice became valuable. She learned to read people carefully, distinguishing between genuine concern and superficial politeness. These small connections provided her with insights and sometimes small victories that kept her motivated. Every bit of understanding she gained about her environment became a stepping stone toward reclaiming her agency. Despite the challenges, there were moments of genuine joy. She and her husband shared stolen moments of laughter and warmth. They would sit quietly after dinner, talking about the future, sharing hopes and dreams that the in-laws could never take from them. In these moments, she found solace and reaffirmed her commitment to the life they were building together. She realized that love, even under pressure, could provide a sense of stability and hope. Her efforts to reclaim control were cautious but deliberate. She began by securing important documents and keeping a closer eye on financial transactions. She also began learning about her rights and the legal ways she could protect herself. Each small action gave her confidence. She discovered that preparation and awareness were more powerful than confrontation alone. She was becoming strategic, combining patience with planning, and it gave her a sense of empowerment she had never felt before. Yet she could not ignore the emotional toll. Anger, frustration, and sadness bubbled beneath the surface, especially when her in-laws spoke with hidden malice or criticized her in subtle ways. She learned to manage her emotions, finding private moments to release them. Sometimes she would write in her journal late at night. Other times she would walk quietly in the garden, letting the cool air calm her racing thoughts. These moments were essential, providing her with the mental clarity to face the next day. She also reflected on her own growth. The woman who had entered the household months ago was no longer the same. She had developed resilience, intuition, and courage. She had learned to observe carefully, think critically, and act with precision. The betrayal she faced had sharpened her mind and strengthened her heart. She understood now that challenges, no matter how painful, could be opportunities for growth and self-discovery. One afternoon, she discovered evidence that a significant family heirloom had been taken without permission. It was a painful reminder of how deeply the in-laws were undermining her life, but it also sparked a determination to act. She realized that ignoring the situation would not protect her. She had to confront it, but carefully. She began planning her approach, thinking through each step, anticipating reactions, and considering the safest and most effective ways to reclaim what was hers. During this time, she also began strengthening her relationship with her husband. They spoke more openly about their fears and frustrations, carefully navigating the tension that lingered between them. He admitted his fear of confrontation with his parents and expressed his hope that they could find a way through together. She reassured him, emphasizing that their unity and mutual support would be crucial in overcoming the challenges they faced. These conversations, though difficult, helped rebuild trust and a sense of partnership. She started taking small steps toward independence, such as managing her own finances more discreetly and securing personal items. Every small victory reinforced her confidence and made her feel less trapped. She realized that independence did not mean isolation. It meant empowerment, the ability to protect herself and her future. Her determination grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by a desire to reclaim her life and her dignity. The in-laws, meanwhile, continued their subtle manipulations. They would comment on spending, criticize minor mistakes, and attempt to assert control over decisions. Yet she learned to navigate these interactions with calmness and intelligence. She did not react impulsively. Instead, she observed, recorded, and planned. Their attempts to unsettle her became opportunities to practice patience and strategic thinking. Each challenge she faced strengthened her resolve. Her inner circle of trusted allies, though small, provided emotional support. A few friends and distant relatives offered advice, encouragement, or simply a listening ear. Their presence reminded her that she was not entirely alone, and that there were people outside the household who could understand and support her. These connections became lifelines, sustaining her spirit as she continued her careful struggle. She also focused on her personal development. Reading, journaling, and quiet reflection helped her stay grounded and maintain perspective. She realized that mental and emotional strength were just as important as strategic planning. Her resilience was being built not only through action, but through self-awareness and inner growth. Each day she became more confident in her ability to navigate the challenges she faced. One night, after a particularly tense day, she sat quietly by the window looking at the stars. She reflected on the journey so far, the betrayals, the small victories, the lessons learned, and the growing strength within her. She understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but she felt ready. She had faced deception, isolation, and subtle manipulation, and had emerged more focused, intelligent, and courageous. The challenges had revealed her strength and determination. As part 3 of her journey unfolded, she was no longer just reacting to events around her. She was becoming proactive, learning to anticipate challenges and prepare for them. Her mind had sharpened, her heart had grown resilient, and her spirit had strengthened. She realized that she could face the in-laws, confront betrayal, and reclaim control, not with anger or recklessness, but with careful planning, courage, and patience. Her relationship with her husband, though still complicated by his fear and hesitation, had deepened. They had learned to communicate more effectively, to share concerns without blame, and to support each other in the quiet moments of understanding. Together they began to envision a future where they could stand united, even against the subtle pressures of the family that sought to control them. By the end of this chapter, she had transformed completely. The once naive and trusting woman was now strategic, resilient, and empowered. She had learned to navigate deception, handle manipulation, and stand firm in the face of betrayal. She had discovered reserves of courage, patience, and intelligence she had never known existed. She was prepared for the next stage of her journey, ready to face whatever challenges awaited with determination and hope. Her struggle had not weakened her. It had made her stronger, more aware, and ready to reclaim her life. By the time she reached the 4th stage of her journey, months of careful planning and quiet observation had taught her much about the nature of the household she lived in. Her awareness of the in-laws' manipulation had sharpened, and her patience and strategy had grown stronger. Yet, despite her careful efforts, there remained a sense of uncertainty about the deeper truths of the family, a feeling that there was something she had not fully understood. She sensed that clarity would come, but only at the right moment. That moment arrived unexpectedly with the news of the death of her father-in-law. His passing was sudden but peaceful, and it brought a mix of grief and reflection to the household. For the first time, she observed a change in the dynamics of the family. The in-laws, usually cold and calculating, were now faced with their own vulnerability and loss. There was tension, yes, but also an undercurrent of emotion that seemed almost human, reminding her that even the most controlling individuals had moments of fragility. The funeral arrangements were quiet and respectful. She accompanied her husband and other family members, moving with care, observing every interaction. The somber mood of the day was contrasted by the memories and emotions that surfaced. She noticed the subtle gestures of affection, the whispered remembrances, and the weight of unspoken regrets. It struck her that life, in its fleeting nature, often left truths unspoken and feelings unresolved. After the ceremony, they visited the gravesite. The tombstone was simple but elegant, engraved with the deceased's name, dates, and a short phrase she could not ignore. As she read the inscription, something deep within her stirred. The words were unexpected, offering insight, closure, and a hint of understanding that had eluded her until now. It was as if the message on the tombstone was speaking directly to her experience, acknowledging struggles she had faced and the strength she had shown. She paused, her eyes lingering on the words. There was a sense of calm in that moment, a quiet satisfaction that was different from the usual tension she felt in the household. The phrase seemed to honor resilience, courage, and honesty, the very qualities she had relied upon to navigate the challenges of her married life. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a genuine smile rise within her, a smile that was not forced, but born of understanding and inner peace. Her husband noticed the expression on her face and asked quietly, "What is it?" She shared with him what she had read, and together they reflected on the meaning. It was a revelation not only about the deceased but also about the nature of the family and her place within it. The words on the tombstone seemed to offer permission to release some of the weight she had been carrying, to let go of anger and resentment and to embrace a perspective that was freeing rather than confining. The in-laws, preoccupied with their own grief, did not notice the subtle transformation in her demeanor. She moved through the household with a renewed sense of confidence, no longer burdened entirely by the fear of their manipulation. The revelation from the tombstone acted as a quiet anchor, allowing her to navigate interactions with clarity and grace. She found that she could respond to challenges without being consumed by emotion, and that her strategic thinking was now complemented by a sense of inner calm. She reflected on the months that had passed, the struggles she had endured, and the ways in which she had grown. Every act of manipulation by the in-laws, every moment of doubt, and every step she had taken to reclaim control had brought her closer to this point. The smile she now carried was not just about a single victory, but about the journey itself, the resilience, patience, and intelligence she had cultivated along the way. Her husband, too, seemed to absorb the quiet strength she radiated. He began to speak more openly about his own feelings of guilt, fear, and confusion. They shared conversations that were honest and heartfelt, discussing not only past challenges but also their hopes for the future. The tombstone, simple as it was, had sparked a moment of clarity and connection that strengthened their partnership. Together they began to envision ways to move forward, not with anger but with understanding and purpose. The next days were marked by a subtle but significant shift in her approach to the household. She continued to monitor financial matters and protect what was hers, but she no longer felt the crushing pressure of constant vigilance. The revelation at the tombstone had given her a sense of perspective that allowed her to balance assertiveness with calmness. She could act strategically while maintaining her composure, turning potential conflicts into manageable challenges. She also began to notice small changes in the family dynamics. The in-laws, still grieving, were less aggressive in their manipulation, perhaps softened by the awareness of mortality and the value of relationships. While they had not changed entirely, the environment became slightly less oppressive, allowing her to navigate daily life with greater ease. She understood that she could not change others entirely, but she could change how she responded and how much power she allowed them to hold over her. In quiet moments, she would revisit the tombstone in her mind, recalling the words and their impact. They became a source of strength and reassurance, a reminder that resilience and courage were recognized even in subtle ways. She found that her smile, once rare and fragile, began to appear more frequently. It was a symbol of her inner victory, a quiet triumph that no one could take away, and a recognition of her own ability to endure and grow. As she continued to live in the household, she found herself making decisions with renewed confidence. She established small boundaries, protected her personal space, and managed interactions with greater skill. Her husband, inspired by her calm determination, began to take more initiative, supporting her in subtle ways. Their partnership, tested by adversity, became stronger, and the foundation of their relationship grew more resilient. The experience also prompted her to reflect on her own values and priorities. She realized that while betrayal and manipulation were painful, they also provided opportunities for growth and self-discovery. She had learned to observe, analyze, and act with intelligence and patience. She had developed resilience that was not dependent on others' recognition, but rooted in her own understanding of herself. This realization brought a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. In practical terms, she continued to secure finances, monitor household matters, and document important events. But these actions were now accompanied by a sense of empowerment rather than fear. Each step she took was informed by knowledge, experience, and calm judgment. She was no longer merely reacting to the in-laws' actions, but proactively shaping her own life within the household. The tombstone's message had transformed her approach, blending strategic thinking with emotional balance. She also began to cultivate small moments of joy, finding pleasure in daily routines and personal hobbies. Cooking, gardening, and quiet walks became sources of comfort and reflection. These activities reminded her that life was not only about struggle and vigilance, but also about appreciating the present and nurturing her own well-being. Her smile became a reflection of both resilience and the small, meaningful joys she allowed herself to experience. One evening, while discussing future plans with her husband, she realized that the journey she had undertaken was far from over, but she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The tombstone had provided not only insight, but also a sense of closure for a chapter of her life. She understood that challenges would continue, but she now faced them with a combination of wisdom, calm, and determination that made her feel unstoppable. The in-laws remained part of her life, but their power to unsettle or control her had diminished. She had learned to navigate their behavior without losing herself, turning past frustration into strategic action. The revelation from the tombstone had offered a perspective that transformed fear into empowerment, and it became a guiding principle for her daily life. She knew that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in mastering oneself. By the end of this period, she had achieved a quiet victory. She smiled more often, carried herself with confidence, and approached challenges with calm assurance. Her relationship with her husband had deepened, rooted in mutual understanding and shared resilience. The tombstone had not only provided a message of closure, but had become a symbol of her own strength and the lessons she had learned. It reminded her that even in difficult circumstances, hope, courage, and intelligence could guide her to a better place. As she looked forward, she felt prepared for the next chapter of her life. She understood that independence, confidence, and emotional resilience were her greatest tools. She no longer felt entirely at the mercy of her in-laws' actions, nor did she carry the burden of constant anxiety. The revelation at the tombstone had shifted her perspective, allowing her to approach life with a balance of caution, clarity, and optimism. She had learned that while she could not control others, she could control her response, her decisions, and her future. This understanding filled her with a sense of peace and quiet triumph, and for the first time in months she smiled freely, knowing that she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for the path ahead. With the revelation from the tombstone still fresh in her mind, she began to envision a life that was truly her own,